Hi everyone, welcome to week 4 of Binary Tree Digital Literacy. Today we will learn about basic programming fundamentals using Python. In Python, we use different methods and logic to make things happen. One of the most useful features of Python is printing code to the console. The print function allows us to display words, numbers, or other information as an output. Now you can try it for yourself. Booleans. Booleans are simple concepts in programming. A boolean just represents either true or false. When writing a program, we may want different code to run in different situations. Booleans help decide what should happen. Booleans are also commonly returned after a comparison. The two important Boolean keywords in Python are true with the capital T and false with the capital F. Booleans in action. We can use booleans to create a conditional for an action to occur. For example, we have a boolean which can be inside an if statement and use that to cause another action. Booleans help control program flow by determining whether a block of code executes based on true or false conditions. They are often used to evaluate comparisons such as x is greater than y to decide the outcome of decisions in a program. Variables. Variables are a very important part of coding. Variables allow us to store individual pieces of data or large amounts of data. Variables can also store different data types. Words are usually stored as strings, whole numbers are usually stored as integers, lists can store more than one value, and floats can be used to store numbers that have decimal points. Operators. Operators are special symbols in Python that perform mathematical or logical calculations. The values being used are called operands. While the symbol shows which operation will happen, some common operators are addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, and modules. These operators use symbols such as plus, minus, slash, asterisk, and percent, respectively. Repeated actions. Python can perform actions repeatedly. To repeat actions, we use loops. Two common types of loops are for loops and while loops. A for loop usually repeats code a certain number of times. A while loop repeats code as long as a condition remains true. Conditionals in Python. Conditionals let program to make decisions. In Python, conditionals are followed by a colon. The line after the conditional must always be indented. The three main conditionals are if, elif, and else. An if conditional checks whether something is true. For example, consider the code on the next slide. In this example, program sets x as a random number between 0 and 10. Program then checks whether x is equal to 7. If it is equal to 7, the program prints hi in the console. If x is not equal to 7, nothing happens. In the first example, x was 7, so hi was printed. In the second example, x was not 7, so nothing was printed. Elif conditionals. Next is the elif conditional, which means else if. An elif statement must come after an if statement. Elif statement checks another condition when the previous conditional is false. In this example, x was not equal to 7, so the first condition was false. However, x was equal to 4, so the elif condition was true and its code ran. Else conditional. Lastly, we have the else conditional. Like elif, an else statement can only be used after an if statement. However, an elif statement is not required before an else statement. The else statement runs when the previous if and elif conditionals are all false. Unlike if and elif, else statement does not have its own condition. Here is an example of the else statement. The program first checks whether x is equal to 7. If it is equal to 7, the program prints hello and just stops. However, if it's not equal to 7, the else statement runs and prints a question mark. In this example, the random number was not 7, so the program printed a question mark. Now we will do the mini activity. First, use GitHub or Stack Overflow to search for small programs or code examples involving conditionals. You can search for terms such as if-else examples, switch case examples, or conditional logic. Next, identify the purpose of the code. Think about what problem the code is solving. For example, the code may be checking user input, controlling a feature, or being used as part of an algorithm. Then break down the logic. Look at how the conditional statements are organized. Check whether the code uses if-else statements, switch statements, or any other types of conditional logic. You should also look for nested conditionals, which are conditionals placed inside other conditionals. Lastly, evaluate the operators being used. Look for operators such as equal to, greater than or equal to, and or. Think about whether the operators are comparing values, combining conditionals, or changing an outcome. Navigating GitHub. For this in-class activity, we will navigate GitHub together. I will share my screen and we will explore different code examples and snippets. We will look at how programmers use variables, booleans, operators, loops, and conditionals in real code. Now we're going to briefly explore GitHub. GitHub is a website where programmers can store, organize, and share their code. A project stored on GitHub is usually called a repository. For this activity, I found a repository containing simple Python programmers for beginners. First, I'm going to search for an odd or even program. This program asks for a number and checks whether that number is even or odd. Let's look at the different parts of this code. First, the variable stores the number entered by the user. The percent sign is called the modulus operator. It finds the remainder after division. The program divides the number by 2 and checks whether the remainder equals 0. This comparison produces a Boolean value of either true or false. If the condition is true, the program prints that the number is even. However, if it returns false, the else statement will print that the number is odd. Now, let's look at another example that uses a for loop to check multiple numbers. In this version, the loop goes to the numbers 1 through 10. For every number, the program checks whether it is even or odd and then prints the result. Before we run it, what do you think the output will be? Let's test it out. Now I will change the ending number from 11 to 6. What do you think will change? Let me run it. This shows how programmers use variables, operators, booleans, loops, conditionals, and print statements together in a real Python program. GitHub contains much larger projects. For reading, small examples like this is a good way to begin understanding other people's code. That concludes week 4.